Hi guys, I hope your week is off to a wonderful start. Ours certainly is. It's a beautiful day. I have my lovely rose from that rose bush I keep taking pictures of. If you guys follow me on Instagram or even on Facebook, I am obsessed with taking pictures of this gorgeous rose bush in our backyard.
It's a stunning bush.
It
and
is.
Every bush needs a friend, as Bob Ross will tell you.
How perfect is that?
It actually is perfect because there's two rose bushes, right?
Yeah, there's two big beautiful rose bushes back there. Wonderful. I'm going to share this video into the group, but today we've got a very special topic, kind of a request from someone that I was talking with, and they asked if I had a video about this, and I guess we have some relationship kind of centered videos, but not specifically about the topic that she requested, and so we decided to go ahead and make a video on this specific topic because it is something that would be really good to have a way of thinking about it that allows you to feel good. And so the situation is that she found out about some health issues, some female changes in her tissues, and she relates it back to a conflict, an emotional conflict with her husband. And the situation is the initial conflict itself was her finding out about something that he didn't share with her or lied about. And so there was a big blow-up fight. But now she feels like he has maybe a habit or a pattern of lying or, obscuring the truth to avoid confrontation. And so she finds herself in a position where she is not really sure how to navigate this situation because, she's in this relationship. I'm assuming that she wants to stay in the relationship. There's reasons that she's staying, but at the same time, she knows that she's been caught off guard and had a conflict shock and has, it's literally affected her physical tissues of her body because she was so conflicted about it. And so she wants to protect herself from this happening again, but how do you do that when you're in a relationship with someone? And so that's what we want to work through, some different ideas and some ways of thinking about it that will allow her to to protect herself emotionally, and then move forward with a game plan.
Yeah. So we're assuming in this case that the lady is staying with the significant other.
I'm assuming that, but I think we should kind of talk about all the different options.
Okay. So if I were to walk someone through this,
yeah.
Well, the first thing that I would do in a situation like that is I leave nothing off the table, right? So I would say, do you want to stay with this person? And do you want to stay with this person? And if you feel like you want to stay with them or you don't want to leave, it might be worthwhile to spend some time really kind of deep diving into exactly why that is, paying attention to what is motivating you to stay in a relationship that to some degree or another is unsatisfactory, or to some degree or another has, or at least potentially has, some deal-breaking kind of hiccups in it. That's really useful because there's one of two situations. When a person is in a relationship and there's some trouble, there's some, kind of not like everyday trouble, there's some serious stuff going on, there's one or two things that are true. Either they're better off leaving the relationship or they're better off staying in the relationship. And if you're better off staying in that relationship, but that's the best thing to do to improve what it's like to be you, that it will stand up to the scrutiny of looking at and really examining, why am I staying in this relationship despite the fact that I have these reservations, despite the fact that I, in some ways, have reason to believe that I may not be able to trust this other person. You want to really be clear with yourself, I think, and I try to do this in my life, be very clear with myself about what is motivating me to do what I'm doing. Because to the degree that I'm doing what I'm doing consciously, to the degree that I understand the values and the priorities that are motivating me to do what I'm doing, and I'm really candid with myself about that, and free and clear and sort of above board with myself about why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm choosing what I'm choosing, I'll tend to choose things that serve me. But if I'm, let's say, staying in a relationship because I'm moving away from the idea of being alone, or I'm moving away from the idea of conflict that would have to, come before breaking up, or whatever I imagine would have to come before, if I'm motivated by those kind of away from priorities, it's possible for me, especially if that's going on unconsciously, it's possible for me to make choices outside of my awareness really that aren't serving me. It's possible for me to stay in a relationship when I would actually be much better served going somewhere else, or at least exploring the idea of going somewhere else. And so I'm a big believer that if a relationship is going to continue, and if it's worth continuing, that it can stand up to that kind of scrutiny, and I think that that's just a really useful thing to do. And if it is in fact a worthwhile relationship that's enriching the experience of the people who are in it, it will be much better because you've looked at the facts and you've said, okay, we've got, personal history of this deception or of this lack of trustworthiness or whatever. I've got my own feelings about that. Maybe I responded to that in ways that were less than resourceful. Maybe I held you responsible for things that I shouldn't have. Maybe I actually held myself responsible for things that you did that had nothing to do with me. It's like you stuff. But I've looked at all of that, and having looked at all of it consciously, I've decided that on the whole balance, this is worth working toward for now. I'm going to continue working on this for now. That for me is a really useful thing. And so even, I would just take a second look at how you're feeling about the relationship and really just pay attention to how it is you've gotten to the point of feeling the way that you're feeling. Like, is it completely just out of the question ending the relationship? And if so, why? Are those reasons that are serving you, or are they not serving you? To the degree that a person has permission to really look at the whole story and to recognize that, like, if the difficult decision were the right decision to make, there are ways that you don't know of that things could work out really wonderfully for you. And I think just recognizing that, don't choose whatever it is that you choose regarding staying with that person versus going, or telling them I'm considering going, or whatever. Don't choose what you choose because you think you can't choose the other thing, because the reality is that all of the options really are available to you, and that it's not important in a given moment that you have to kind of see yourself doing something before you see how to do it. You know what I mean? And so I think that's just a really important thing for starting.
Yeah, and then also keeping in mind, she did express that she's aware that she has some ongoing story in her mind about not being enough, which she believes is manifesting as thyroid issues, which could be a powerlessness, or feeling too slow, like you're like always a little bit behind. It could also manifest as a self-devaluation affecting muscles, bones, soft tissue, lymphatic system of the body, which is actually our topic of the month for next month for the Training in the Resolve program. It's all about, part one of self-devaluation, because there's so much nuance to it. So if you are actively in some other type of conflict where you're not feeling enough, you're not feeling good enough, you're not feeling empowered in your life, or you're feeling bad about yourself and you're devaluing yourself, that will also color staying in a relationship that may not be serving you, because you don't feel like if you feel like you're not enough, you may feel like you don't deserve any better than to stay. And so those are other things to keep in mind. If you were the absolute best, most confident version of yourself, would you put up with that type of behavior? And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, most people would say, you know what? No, if I was absolutely 100% confident in myself, in my ability to find a new partner, I think a lot of people resign themselves due to all sorts of arbitrary things that we make up in our minds. Amount of time I've been in the relationship and that investment, my age, maybe I won't be able to find somebody else. I think that holds a lot of people in something is better than nothing. I'd rather have the comfort of this, dysfunction than the unknown, than the fear of being alone, which I think is a big reason that someone might stay in a relationship where they're fairly certain that they can't trust the other person. They're fairly certain that that person is going to betray their trust at some point or lie to them. And so I think that getting real with yourself and being really kind of like, okay, if I were the best version of myself, if I had shed all of these old stories, if I really stepped into the person I would like to be, would she stay in this relationship? And I think just entertaining that question may cause some things to come up, may make you look at this in a new, different light, because if that's the case, all of that can be changed. All of your self-image, the way that you think about yourself, which is what the self-devaluation module is going to be all about, is your self-concept. How do you see yourself? It's all malleable, and if we've been thinking in a certain way for a certain period of time, our self-concept seems really fixed, and you kind of don't really go too far outside of it. But when you start seeing what it's made out of, like the anatomy of your self-concept, and you start thinking about yourself in a new and different way, you can start to shed that conflict, and that may lead you to a different resolution to this particular conflict. So,
well, and it's interesting too, because if your self-concept, if my self-concept is that of a person who can only get so much and can only deserve so much, and you know, or I deserve this much, but the world works this way, so I can only have this much of what I deserve, or whatever, that will do a couple of different things. It might influence me to stay in a relationship when perhaps there are other better options that are available to me. Perhaps being by myself for a while would be a better option, depending on what's going on. At the same time, though, if it will keep me in that relationship, it will also keep me in patterns of focusing, patterns of feeling, patterns of behaving that will tend to evoke from the other individual evidence that my self-concept is about accurate and about true, evidence that perhaps I'm not enough, evidence that, you know, I don't deserve better. And it's this strange thing how two people, when they come together, they each have a concept of themselves, and it never fails that there's this kind of synchronization that happens where I know just exactly how to evoke from Melissa behavior, treatment, you know, just stuff that will tend to confirm that my self-concept is accurate and true, and that she will do the same thing with me. And to the degree that we have both improved what our self-concepts are, we have really improved our experience of one another, and I think that's just a really useful thing. But so, you know, move into, like, let's assume that this person is going to stay in the relationship. How can she move forward in this and create a maximum of what she wants without setting herself up for things like possible self-devaluation? You know, I think the first really big thing is this is just the belief that I have that I found immensely useful. I'm 100% responsible for my experience of you. I'm 100% responsible for my experience of your behavior. And what that means is that I'm not responsible necessarily for what you do. You know, if you go off and you do something else, you know, that's like, let's say it's a betrayal of me or something, I'm not responsible for the fact that happened, because I'm not pulling your behavioral strings. I am responsible, though, for the experience of that behavior that I create. And the reason for that is that the meanings that I assign to what you do, what I decide that the fact that you did what you did means about me and about my worthiness, that's a thing that I do, and it's a thing that impacts my experience, and it's a thing that impacts my well-being, so that's why I'm responsible for it. I think just basically buying into that is a really important kind of a thing, because you're in a situation here where you have a person, you love that person, and or your life is kind of built around them, or it's entwined in such a way that it's intimidating, or, you know, you maybe have kids together, you built a lot of stuff together, so taking it apart, there's a lot of chaos there and a lot of reorganization that would have to happen. So there's all these motivating factors to stay with this person. Perhaps there's genuine love for that person, perhaps a lot of the time you really are very happy together. At the same time, though, that person has a pattern of behaving that leads you to believe that they have a capacity for deception. They have a capacity to love you, they have a capacity to want to be honest with you or whatever, and yet the end result is that they, to one degree or another, they're willing to deceive you, right? That's the thing, and you actually had experiences of them doing that. I think acknowledging that it's really a calculated risk, you know, acknowledging that their deception has nothing to do with you, it's their stuff, you know, there's something about their values, there's something about their patterns of focusing, there's something about the perhaps unconscious dynamics of relating to other people that this person has at this moment in time that leads them to be deceptive. It has nothing whatsoever to do with you at all. And so if I'm choosing to stay with that person, I'm saying to myself, well, I'm not going to assume they're going to do this again. But what I'm going to do is acknowledge to myself I'm taking a calculated risk. I'm going to stay with this person in full knowledge and full awareness of the fact that they have been deceptive before. I'm going to take responsibility for the fact that I'm choosing to stay with that person, despite the fact that I know those things. And I'm going to make a commitment to myself that says that should they engage in that kind of behavior in the future, I'm deciding before that even happens, that if that happens, I don't expect that it will necessarily. I'm not waiting for it to happen, but if it does happen, it's not negative thinking. If you've lied to me 3 times in the past and I decide to give you another chance, it isn't negative thinking on my part to say, okay, if you lie again, that's going to have to be the deal-breaking moment for me, and I'm going to go ahead and decide in advance that I'm not going to feel bad about it because it's obviously something that you're doing. That's a big thing that I would do too. And say, like, listen, you know, I love this person, but they've lied several times in the past. I'm not going to hold that against them. I'm not going to be waiting for them to lie to me again and try to see if I can catch them in a lie. I'm just going to decide to focus my mind on what I want, to focus my mind on what feels good to me, to move forward in a new self-concept for myself. And when and if this behavior that's happened before happens again, I'm going to decide ahead of time regardless of what the details of that situation are, that it has nothing to do with me. I'm not going to allow myself to decide that this means that I'm not worthy of something better. I'm not going to allow myself to decide that this means anything other than the fact that, 3 strikes and you're out or whatever. The fact that they obviously... It doesn't even mean that they don't love you. It just means that in this moment in time, they aren't capable of treating you in the way that you have decided that you want to be treated and therefore deserve to be treated. That's all that it means. It's nothing personal. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really the way that you do that, is that you decide in advance what that behavior is going to mean. It's their stuff. And you acknowledge to yourself 100% responsibility for the experience of their behavior that you create moving forward, and really begin to systematically build a self-concept of you that makes it so that you aren't dependent on that person being a certain way. Love that person. Don't hold back. Don't withdraw from the relationship. If you're choosing to be with them all the way. But build a self-concept that allows you to be 100% on board with another person. And yet if that person demonstrates themselves to be incapable of treating you the way you desire and deserve to be treated, that you're fine. That you are able to take that, respond resourcefully to it, and say, listen, I'm sorry, but this has nothing to do with you. It's just I have certain standards, right, from my life experience. I'm going to be treated a certain way by the person that I'm with. That treatment's not coming from you. I'm not going to compromise, right, the treatment that I know I'm deserving of because you can't get your shit together, because you can't figure out how to be honest with the person that you love. Very sorry about that. And I think that that's really moving forward how you do that. Because there's 2 things that you don't want to do. You don't want to be a doormat. You don't want to just stay with this guy and have him lie to you for the rest of your life because you deserve better than that. The other thing is that you don't want to stay with him and hold it like a guillotine over his head. You know what I'm saying? Just expecting for him to wait. Because you will create an experience of him deceiving you if you're looking for it. And so what we have to do is find some kind of a balance that's like, how can we make you... how can we make it possible for you to give this another shot? Give this person another chance. Really give 100% of yourself to this relationship and derive all the benefits that could potentially be there, while at the same time giving you some way of experiencing a relapse that doesn't involve you compromising your self-concept. And I think that's really the way to do it. Yeah.
Hey, Wade, what's up? I think that's huge. I think kind of having this bubble, and I think that the phrase rational self-interest comes to mind of truly having your bubble, having this space of yours, your concept of yourself, where you interact and you get wonderful things from this relationship, but the things that matter most about your self-concept don't come from another person. And that's where we put ourselves in a very vulnerable position, where we think that love means a lot of times that, you always treat me the way I need to be treated, and that, I depend on you for my happiness, for my security, for my everything. And we think that that is the ultimate form of intimacy. And so if that's your form of intimacy and then something like this happens, it really is. It's shattering in a different way than if you kind of have this sense of just individuality, regardless of if you're in a a very intimate relationship with someone, but you still have kind of that bubble of individuality of here I am as an individual going around getting the things that I want, giving things to other people, but but I am self-contained in that sense of my self-image, my self-worth does not depend on you. That's huge. And I had to make that shift, in our relationship, because I was just used to this kind of, very romantic, all-encompassing, this, intimacy that I think does breed dysfunction, because it makes you kind of, very dependent on another person.
There's such a huge distinction between intimacy and dependency. Yeah. And they're inversely correlated. To me, and this is the interesting thing, is that I work with people all the time, and my whole work with people is helping them to become independent. Truly independent, autonomous people. And I develop very intimate, personal, friend relationships with people as a result of doing that. Even look at the instance of a mother and her child. The child is fully dependent on the mother in most respects for several years of their life, but I've watched this happen over and over again. The parent-child relationships that are the most intimate, which are the most healthy moving forward, where the bonds are strongest, are the ones in which the mother prepares the child to be independent. Not the one where the mother trains the child to be dependent on her because she mistakes dependency and intimacy as one thing. And to the degree that her child becomes independent, their intimacy erodes. Those relationships tend to be not as healthy. It's the parents that really equip the child child to be a fully functioning individual, really ready for like the next stage of life, that's where those intimate bonds really come from. And I think that to the degree that we are dependent upon our significant other for things that can best and usually only be done by ourselves for ourselves, we actually inhibit our capacity to be intimate with that person. Because if I'm depending on you to prop up my self-image, and now it's nice to know that you respect the work that I do and admire the things that I'm able to come up with and appreciate my but that's like icing on the cake. I got to have a cake there first. The cake is the self-concept. Otherwise I've got a just disgusting big pile of icing. It's too sweet and it's not good. But when you've got that cake there, which is your own self-concept, which is you got your own show going, and if they decide that you don't like your show, tough shit for them. I mean, it's like you're able in that moment to really, it diminishes the motivation for self-deception. And self-deception is just like one of the hugest handbrakes that's holding people back. They held me back for a really long time. I couldn't acknowledge to myself what was going on in my life, in my relationships, in my professional life, because it wasn't psychologically viable to me. And it means that I couldn't afford to be fully aware of what was true to me and for me in a given moment in time. So I bullshitted, or I rationalized, or I sugarcoated, or I distracted myself, or I went unconscious, or I ignored things, or I got angry about things instead of facing them kind of head on. And I think that that's one of those things, if you really care about your relationship, becoming independent mentally, emotionally. I mean, I think it's a personal preference how independent financially you are. I mean, but I think that really as an individual, whatever that means for you is the key thing. To the degree that you as an individual are a fully functioning kind of self-contained individual, you've got a capacity for intimacy for another person. Because I know Melissa would do absolutely phenomenal without me. She doesn't need me for anything. I mean, we come together and we collaborate really productively. But I know that she will never stay with me because she's afraid she couldn't be happy without me. She'll never stay with me because she's afraid she couldn't find somebody else. She'll never stay with me because she has a fear of being alone. And because of all of that, if she's here, I have this wonderful knowing that she's here because she's making a conscious choice to. She's choosing to, but she's not dependent on me. And because of the fact that I want someone kind of to be with me volitionally, I want the experience of being with somebody who is with me despite the fact that they know they could be with someone else or be alone and thrive. That's the experience that I want, because I don't want the experience of being with someone who's with me because they don't think they can make money without me, or they don't think they could be a full person or have meaning in their life without me. That sounds like a pain, right? You're here, and I know there's only one reason you would be here, and I think it's the same way the other way around. That's really freeing. And when you really free yourself from a lot of those, what would you call them, false premises about the nature of a relationship. Well, we love each other so much that I've totally outsourced responsibility for my own life experience to him. That's how much we love each other. That's not love. That's dysfunction. That's impractical. That's diminishing, in my view, a person's capacity for love. Because real love is like, listen, we don't have to be together, and yet we are. You know what I mean? We could be apart, but we're together. Mm-hmm. That's really nice and really lovely. And I think that it doesn't matter whether you're alone, whether you're together, we've been together a long time, a short time, whether your relationship is great or whether it's a little rocky. I think that cultivating this self-image and like becoming independent doesn't mean that you become obstinate. It doesn't mean that you just start laying down the law for no reason or putting your foot down. It's totally inner work. It's totally like cultivating literally your concept of yourself. And it's not about, if you feel dependent on the other person, it's not about blaming the other person for that stuff. I mean, that's at various points in our relationship, because like I did like a lot of the content stuff and you did like a lot of like the back office stuff, a lot of the business stuff. At various points in our relationship in the last several years, I've felt sort of uncomfortably dependent upon Melissa for certain aspects of our activity. And it would have been really easy for me in those situations to take that out on her or to blame her. But whose responsibility was it that the division of labor in this relationship and in the business and everything else was such that I, in those moments in time, didn't have the kind of technical acumen that would allow me to feel really fully independent? Well, that's my responsibility. That was my doing. And to the degree, and it's like one of those things we actually decided was it'd be really good if you kind of got your stuff going, and I could help you with the content and you could kind of help me get the back office stuff going, so that we were kind of, there wasn't much gap between us in that situation, so that we really could have that benefit of that independent self-concept, and so that we could really be self-sustaining apart, so that we could really come together kind of more powerfully.
Yeah, and these end up being kind of like relationship principles, which for us help to create that anti-fragility, help to create a self-concept that is less vulnerable to conflict shocks, and which is what all of this work is about. What Resolve is all about is giving you, equipping you with the tools to help start crafting this new vision, this new version of yourself that isn't as vulnerable to, to shocks, to things happening, and you having a conflict shock, which then turns into, an adaptive phase of your body, which turns into a healing phase in your body once you resolve it. And, you can prevent so many, bigger kind of health issues and flare-ups of symptoms if you can start looking into this and start looking into your self-concept and looking into how you interact, how you see yourself, how you see the world, how you see other people. And that's where we've taken German New Medicine and the Ever Better Thought technology that Steve has developed and merged them together to give you practical things that you can do. What can I do about this? Now that I know about GNM, now that I know about conflict shocks triggering tissue adaptations, which is the source of all of my pain, sickness, and discomfort. Now that I know that, how do I actually safeguard myself? How do I resolve the conflicts that are currently active? How do I help prevent conflicts in the future from happening? Well, you do it by doing this inner work, by looking at all of these different layers of your life experience, and you start making shifts, making improvements in the way that you mostly see yourself. Really, it all does start with this self-concept, which is why I'm really, really, really excited for the module that will be released into the Resolve program in June, because it's all about this self-devaluation. And so self-devaluation is a very interesting type of conflict, because from some of the things I was reading from Dr. Hammer is he says it's not even necessarily like a huge shock. You know how we talk about conflict shocks and like the DHS, like the DHS is like something that really just catches you off guard and you find yourself really surprised in that moment. A self-devaluation can be more subtle, can be less obvious, it can be more nagging, and it really has to do with your perception. How am I seeing myself? How am I seeing myself in relationship to you? How am I seeing myself in relationship to the world? All of these little subtleties. And when your body gets the message that you are not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough for some certain activity, something about life that you're not feeling up to task for, your body hears, okay, we're not strong enough, which initiates your physical tissues to start a renovation project. And that's what happens, is there's erosion of your connective tissues in your body depending on the intensity of the conflict. The specific nature of the conflict will determine where on your body is affected. But what happens is your body starts taking things apart. It starts taking, demineralizing bone and in lymph nodes and muscles. And the whole purpose of it is to clear space to reinforce, because when the healing phase comes on for a self-devaluation conflict, that's when the body is restoring. It's rebuilding bone. It's restoring the tissues of the lymphatic system. So your lymph nodes are swollen. And so understanding that like aches and pains and muscle soreness and shoulder problems and wrist problems and all of these musculoskeletal complaints, that is like one of the number one things. I remember I was reading those medical statistics about like just how much money people spend on trying to get rid of these musculoskeletal complaints. Really all boils down to self-devaluation conflicts, because how pervasive are self-devaluation conflicts? We live in, a day and age where we're dependent upon social media for positive feedback. And if we don't get it, we devalue ourselves. If we do get it and it's the wrong kind, we devalue ourselves. And so, it's really starting with yourself and building this really strong self-concept. And I really think like with children too, like that is like the number one thing, is helping them to craft their like a very strong self-concept is the best way to conflict proof yourself. So whether it's in relationships, in business, in life, you've got to start there. And I think that that's really important for working out this relationship thing before you're a relationship. And that's why kind of in all of our work, and Steve, like he has done a lot of relationship coaching, but it's never been for the relationship. He works in individuals, and so it always has to start with the individual first, because really that's all a relationship is an interaction between two individuals, and those people and their self-concept as individuals is so important to determine how they're going to interact with one another and how productive and fulfilling that interaction is going to be.
Yeah, there's two experiences. The thing that we say, like, there's a relationship. Well, to me, it's like there's your experience and there's the experience of the other person. And the funny thing, and this is the interesting thing that I found, and this is like, because a lot of people, they want to fix the relationship. And I say, okay, if that's going to happen, without exception, the best way to do that is for you to stop caring so much about that relationship so that you can give a little bit more attention to the quality of your experience. And if we can get that other person, your significant other, doing the same thing with their experience, we're going to discover some really interesting stuff. We're going to discover exactly what needs to happen in order for those experiences to get better. And I'm not a big, I think it's one of these things that if two people are together and they need to be together, they're supposed to be together, it's good for them to be together. If both of their experiences get better, I don't think that a relationship that's supposed to continue falls apart because the experience of both individuals gets better. It just doesn't happen. It gives you enough space that you can be close, because sometimes it's just things are so jumbled up. It's not a closeness. It's almost like like we're really distant and that we're not really romantically connected anymore, but we're all up in everybody's business when it comes to what they're thinking, how they're looking at me, all this difference. And it's like I spend so much time wondering what she's thinking that I have absolutely no idea what I'm thinking, and therefore I don't know why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, the way that I'm feeling, and therefore I look at her behavior and look for something in her behavior to blame for the bad feeling that I'm having, because I'm focusing on what I don't want, and I don't know it because I'm wondering so much what she's thinking. And when you kind of just separate everyone and get everyone kind of doing their own stuff, all of a sudden everyone starts feeling better, everyone starts manifesting better behaviors, people start making better decisions, you start seeing the other person in a better way. And the interesting thing about this self-concept, and really why self-devaluation is like my favorite topic ever, like next month's going to be like one of the best months, I think, for sure, is like reality really is your consciousness pushed out. Like your relationships, the things that you attract and are attracted to, the patterns of behavior and interaction that exist between you and not just your significant other, but your employees or your boss or your friends, your family, social, all of that stuff. Reality is just consciousness pushed out. It's your self-concept pushed out and reflected back to you. We went to Chipotle today because we were so hungry. And I had just a really great self-concept today. I was feeling really good. I was in that space. Every single person in Chipotle today was friendly. They gave me a compliment for my shirt. We were joking. This is one of those girls, it was her first day. I was asking her how she was liking it. Everything was so nice. Very often when I go to Chipotle, I feel like the people don't really want me to be there. Or I feel like, they almost don't see me. And it's kind of like, but today, I felt so good, right? My concept of myself was one of someone who was interested, interesting, worthy of positive attention, looking to give positive attention, having fun, feeling wonderful, and that really was reflected back to me. And this happens in relationship. I swear, I could leave this room and really lower my self-concept by focusing on things that I don't want, by thinking about why something isn't more the way I want it to be than it is, in fact, by telling myself I'm not good enough. And I could come back into this room and I could elicit from Melissa behavior that would confirm that downgraded self-concept without exception. And if she wouldn't give me the behaviors that I needed, I could do a little cooking of the books perceptually. I could perceive things. I could isolate a certain thing. Well, she said, oh, your complexion's looking better. She didn't say it looked good. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. Like, what's that supposed to mean? How did it look before? And I will do. And so there's this really powerful thing that comes with accepting complete responsibility for your experience of other people, for your self-concept. And it doesn't mean it's your fault if your self-concept isn't the way that you want it to be. It's like, listen, there's a thing called self-concept and it matters a whole lot and it informs everything about everything in your life. And here's some stuff you can do to really start to improve that. And when you do, everything about your life starts to improve. You start to exude a different communication to other people. And when you change your communication, you change the responses that you get. Now, sometimes that means that other people's behavior changes in exactly the way that you want it to. Other times, it just means that those people kind of fall away from your life, because when you cease to attract that kind of treatment, when you cease to be kind of like a match for that kind of treatment, when you cease to be a receptacle for it, or a ready receiver for, like if I'm devaluing myself and someone comes along and does something that contributes to my self-devaluation, that I can't blame that person for that thing. They're matching me. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't mean that what they're doing is okay. It just means that it's consistent with my self-concept. And if I had a different self-concept, it would change. Now, let's say that same person came up and they were really mean to me or abusive to me, and I had a self-concept of a worthy person, or a person who deserved to be treated a certain way. Well, they wouldn't treat me that way more than once. And they sure as hell wouldn't treat me that way more than twice, right? Because they would do that, and I would say, it would register to me not as something that made me feel sad, not as something that made me feel bad. It would register to me as something that was so profoundly inappropriate that it wasn't going to be allowed to happen again. And that's the key thing, is that like if people are mistreating me in my life, they're lying to me, or if I'm in a relationship, they're cheating on me, or they're physically or emotionally abusive to me, it's not that I'm making them do that to me. And it's not that they aren't responsible for their treatment of me, but I'm responsible for my experience of their behavior. And what that means is that if their behavior is unacceptable, it's my responsibility to have a self-concept that creates an experience of that behavior that says, to hell with this isn't going to work, I'm going somewhere else, or excuse me, you need to change this, or I'm out. Only you can do that. And I think that when you recognize that, and when you start really, and what's the opposite of self-devaluation? It's self-appreciation. I think it's increasing in value. When you start to do that, you start to elicit different responses. You set different standards for yourself. And it's not a willpower thing. It's not an effort thing. It's not a forced thing. You become incompatible with the experiences that you don't want to have anymore. And when you're not compatible with those experiences, you just don't have them. Mm-hmm. And it begins to change. And literally, so, reality is sort of your consciousness pushed out. When you change your consciousness, when you change who you are conscious of being, who you assume that you are, who you conceive yourself to be, who you are in reality changes. And when who you are in reality changes, everything around you starts to match that. You know what I'm saying? And if you need to call somebody on their bullshit, you don't have to sit down and plan that out. If you get your self-concept right, you'll just call them out at the perfect moment, or send them a letter, or whatever that bridge of incident is that's going to take you to the life that you really want. When you find a way to avoid that self-devaluation, when you really start consciously building that self-concept, really assuming yourself to be who you really want to be. I want to be somebody who knows they deserve better than this. I want to be somebody who just knows when they're not being treated fairly or good enough, and who responds to that in a way that creates more of what they want. When you just become that person, when you appropriate that state of being, the behaviors that go along with that affirm that create that in your reality, they just start happening. And that's just a really powerful thing.
It is. Thank you, Jessica. You were very sweet. One of the things I was going to say is I remember, because in a previous relationship, I had been cheated on in like a absolutely horrific kind of way. It was very traumatic for me. And, that moment, and again, this is something we talk about in the Resolve program, is the moment that you have this conflict, in this trauma, that it changes your self-concept. The fact that something happened to you, it profoundly impacts the way you see yourself, the world, and other people. And so we make these decisions about ourselves. We establish all sorts of beliefs. We just establish an aspect of our self-concept that changes based upon that trauma. And so I became a person with trust issues after I was cheated on. And so, I had this concept of myself where, okay, this happened to me one time, this is never going to happen to me again. My, way of calculating that was like to watch out for it all the time, and to, and to kind of be on guard, and, if you're talking to somebody, to be just kind of on edge, and then to be weird and shady about it, or look at your phone when you're in the bathroom, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. It would manifest in all these really dysfunctional behaviors, because I had a concept of myself that I'm a person with trust issues, and I thought that somehow excused this really crazy behavior, because of the fact, well, you need to understand that because I was cheated on in a previous relationship, I'm allowed to do this crazy stuff, and you just need to kind of abide that.
Right.
And so when we kind of worked that out and discussed, and I figured out that, oh wow, I'm looking at myself as a person with trust issues, and therefore I am perceiving the world in a way where trust issues are a thing, and where, you know, that bad things can happen to me, or you might cheat on me.
And what's so interesting about that in terms of like consciousness being like, or reality being consciousness pushed out, is that I'm just not a cheating kind of person. I'm like, I'll break up with you if there's someone else that I'm more interested in kind of person. I can't, like, that's just not me, right? So that's just not going to happen. Not because I'm a virtuous guy or a good guy or I'm just so great.
You're good.
Yeah, thanks. but what I'm saying is that for reasons totally independent of my moral character, that just simply was not going to happen, right? The cheating was just not going to be a thing in this relationship. And the interesting thing, though, was I was very aware, and the more you brought it up, and the more we fought about it, and the more you micromanaged things, and the more that you pointed out, oh, you're talking to her, oh, who's that, and all this, that, you know, I was like, if I were going to do this, if this were something that, like, under some circumstances, I would say, oh, to hell with it, let me go talk to this other girl, that you couldn't have done anything that would have been more of a push in that direction if I was such inclined to do that. Because if I'm talking to somebody, I'm going to say, well, God, you know, I apparently I'm that kind of a person. So if you were going to influence me to do it, you couldn't have done a better job influencing me to cheat on you, I don't think, than you did in that moment in time, or that period of time where it was just constant scrutiny and constant expectation and constant contempt and almost constant disappointment and anger before it had even happened. Mm-hmm. I know you're going to do it, you son of a bitch. I don't understand why you're pretending like you're not. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
that was you and that. And from my perspective, it was just kind of like, gosh, this wasn't always true. This was very irregular, right? And even during that season, it wasn't like you were this way all the time. But when it would flare up, that was the only thing that existed. And so that was just an interesting thing, that if you were going to influence someone else, that would be a very effective way to do it.
Well, that's what I became aware of, is like the weird behavior coming from me was almost like a push, like, don't do this stuff, but like, I'm pushing you to do this thing that I'm also telling you not to do, is really when I became aware of it, it was so obvious to me. And I was like, gosh, well, really, I think the answer is, you know, like when you really think through all of these things, is to be so into myself and me and what I'm doing, and that I'm so great and I'm so fun to be around and I'm so awesome. Why wouldn't you want to hang out with me? And if you decided for some reason to go talk to that girl and go hang out with her, I'd be like, okay, bye. I'm having such a good time. I guess I'm gonna have a good time with somebody else, and that's not gonna be you. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh gosh. Plus, it feels so much better all of the time to be into myself and feeling good about myself and happy about myself. And plus, you want to be around me. You are actually drawn towards me instead of me being weird and shady and, you know, pushing you away while saying, no, you love me, don't go do this thing that I'm almost forcing you to do, in a sense.
Want you, it's almost as one of those things too, and that's an interesting thing. I want you to want to do those things, but not do them because of the fact that we're so committed to each other. But then I want you to make a mistake and do it so that I could hold it over your head forever. I could forgive you. It was a strange kind of a thing, right? Yeah. It had nothing to do with you at all. Mm-hmm. It was not, and really, and that was the solution though. Like even just then when you started talking about, I just realized that what I needed to do was build my self-concept such that I wasn't tempted to try to basically catch this thing before it happened, but what would end up basically being almost trying to force this thing to happen, this infidelity or whatever, when you had something better to think about. When it was like, listen, I actually don't think this has happened. I don't have any reason to suspect that Steve's actually doing this. And even if he did, well, F him, because I've got a lot of good things going on myself. I have no reason to suspect it's happening, and if it does, I know just what I'm going to do. I'm going to move on and have fun in ways that I don't need to know about right now, so I think I can let everything be okay. That's exactly the strategy that I use in situations like that. That's exactly the thing that I do now that I didn't do before. When I used to worry about everything, I would say, oh my God, what if that happens? But I would never answer the question. I'd just say, oh my God, what if that happens? And what if they think this? And what if she does this? And what if I say something embarrassing? What if I said something embarrassing? What if they misinterpret? I would say something, a perfectly fine, innocuous, I don't know, stop and chat, small talk with someone, and then for hours after that, I would scan it over and over again in my mind. I would try to come up with some plausible way that they could be upset or offended about what I had said or think I was weird. Or, you know, I would do this. I mean, it was amazing the amount of psychic energy that I squandered on that. That's self-devaluation for sure. And now what I do is, I remember the cure for this for me was I said, well, they probably didn't interpret it that way. And even if I did slip up and say something that was poorly timed or whatever, that's not so bad. What if I just let that be okay? What if I kind of like drop the vanity thing? What if I just kind of just say, listen, I'll work with whatever happens. I'm okay being a guy who said something a little embarrassing if it happens. I'm not going to waste any time worrying about it. I'm just going to talk to people and trust them to kind of use their judgment, kind of like be magnanimous, kind of give me a break if I say something kind of awkward or something like that. If they said something awkward to me, I wouldn't hold it against them. I would just kind of say, oh yeah, I know exactly what that's like because I spent years of my life doing that and worrying about it for a long time after. And when you have that ability, when you build that self-concept, I don't have a self-concept of a person who's perfect or a person who never says something that's a little bit kind of, I don't know, is it awkward?
Awkward.
Yeah, awkward.
Yeah.
I have a self-concept of a person who responds resourcefully to that stuff, who does it, and just, or who, if it happens, just lets it be okay and just sort of moves on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And it just changed so much for me because now I don't have to worry about what other people are doing, and it kind of brings it really back around to what we're talking about with this person who's with someone and they've got a history of lying. I mean, relationships have momentum. It's true. And in the beginning we said, don't just stay with somebody because you've always been with them. But the reality is, in a lot of cases, if you're together and things aren't really bad, there's just some kind of like nagging things in the background, there's a lot of self-concept work that can be done in the context of that relationship. And if you don't have to intellectually really choose, well, am I going to stay or am I going to go? If you'll just do that self-concept work where you are, the bridge of incident will take you where you really kind of need to be going.
Exactly.
And I think just let it have that momentum and just start to build that independent self-concept, that you have a self-concept as a woman or as a man or whatever the case may be, that is independent of the behavior of any other person. That there's nothing you can do that will change my self-concept, right? There's nothing I can do that will change your self-concept for the worse, unless it's like, okay, I like that, I'm going to work on that. And I think once you're there, you can really give people a fair chance. You can really, if you think it's in your best interest to give this guy one more time to get his stuff together and, be forthright with you and honest. And when your self-concept is really solid, you can also do another thing that's hugely useful, which is you can say, have I played any role in eliciting this behavior that I do not want from this guy? Sure, he's sneaking around. Sure, it doesn't mean it's my fault, but he's doing some kind of like shady stuff. I'm not going to excuse this behavior, but I wonder, because that behavior is in my experience, and because my experience of it isn't something that I want, because I want to improve my experience for my own selfish reasons, I wonder if there's anything that I'm doing to contribute to eliciting this behavior from this person. Not that they're not responsible for it, but I wonder if there's something maybe that I've done in the past. I wonder if building my own self-concept such that I'm not dependent upon him doing certain things, not doing other things, in order for me to be just basically emotionally okay as a woman or as an individual. I wonder if as I assert my own independence in the own kind of realm of my experience and self-concept, I wonder if my patterns of interaction with him will change in such a way that he might feel more comfortable being honest with me. Perhaps in the past there's been an unintentional punishment of this guy for being honest with you, or a negative reinforcement or something like that, where he told you something and then you were kind of, it was somewhere in his brain he calculated it was more trouble than it was worth. I'm going to see if I can just get away with it. You know what I mean? When you become aware of that stuff, you don't feel bad about it. You just really start to build your own self-concept. Whatever those patterns were that you don't have to decide whether they were there or not. To the degree that your own self-concept becomes really self-assured and really strong, that stuff, if it's there, just naturally begins to fall away. And when you have a self-concept that doesn't depend upon him being a certain way, you create, as far as you can, an environment that is maximally conducive to him being honest with you. And that's an interesting thing, because if let's say that let's just place myself right here and right now in a situation having done something that is really not right by Melissa, really bad by myself. I don't know if I've wasted some money, or let's say I've cheated on her, or something really awful. Like, I'm just here and now, the reality is that thing has happened. It hasn't happened. Let's pretend that it has. If I know your self-concept is independent of anything that I do, well, you might be angry at me. You might break up with me, but I'm not afraid of like a catastrophe in the way that I would be if I thought that you were dependent upon me being some way that I obviously am not, because I've messed up in a way that you could have never expected. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so if you were in a situation where you wanted to, I love like multiple birds with one stone. I guess killing birds with rocks isn't nice, but I like when you can do a bunch of things at one time, like, can we give this guy another chance? Can we see if the relationship can work out? And can we insulate ourselves against conflict shocks in the event that he proves himself to be not so trustworthy? If we can do all of that at once with one method, I'm really into that, which is exactly what Resolve is about, which is exactly what the self-concept work is about. If you can make it so that you make it maximally easy for me to behave in the way that you want me to, which is to be honest with you. And if you can make it so that if I'm not honest with you, you are maximally well positioned to respond resourcefully to that and to be unbroken by it. If you can do both of those things with one method or with one approach or one strategy or one kind of approach to self-work, that's a very good high-yield thing. And I think that's what the self-concept stuff does.
Yeah, and it's not to say that, like, that even if I do have a really good, strong self-concept, if I find out about something, that thing in and of itself might not shock me or catch me off guard in a sense that I really wasn't prepared for. You might still have a bit of a shock. You might still go through a bit of an adaptive phase, but all of this work is to elevate your awareness so that if that is the case, if you do find that, like, wow, this is, I thought my self-concept was pretty good, but this really hit me hard. You have the awareness and the wherewithal and the kind of cognitive ability to take that situation, and it's about that time that Shmuel starts doing this crazy back scratch on the floor.
You're doing a video for too long, your dog starts sneezing and writhing around just off the camera.
It's really funny. That it wouldn't still affect me and cause perhaps some type of, physiological shift. But if I'm aware enough that I can, like, get myself to a place where I'm like, okay, what exactly is it about this that is causing me to still, I think what that's doing is revealing to me things about my self-concept that still need some reinforcement, still need some work, because that's the thing is you can build a self-image, a self-concept that is anti-fragile, that does, rise above really tough life circumstances, and know that you're going to be better off. Like, if you just knew that, literally, if you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, if you built the belief, if you installed the belief on your belief system that everything is always working out for me, everything is always working out in my favor, and if that was your first thought when something happens, when you get a bill in the mail, when you find out someone smashed into your car, when when someone unexpectedly passes away, and you immediately, you get that this thing happened and there's going to be some follow-up and you're going to have, but you kind of just have that deep inner knowing that everything is always working out for you. Everything is always working out for my greatest benefit. There is some way, there is some path that, although I can't see it right now, although it doesn't make sense on this plane and this level at this stage, I know that there is a way, because everyone has an example where they say, oh, at the time it just seemed like the worst thing ever, but in retrospect, now I can see that thing set me up for all of this awesome stuff, and I couldn't see it then, and it was so hard. But you see it after the fact, how, people will say, God, or there was this orchestration of events that happened and it was perfect, but this bad thing had to happen at this moment, this shock, this whatever, and when you can see it then, when you can take a shocking event, when you can take a less than ideal something happening, and you kind of absorb it, and you say, okay, I know how I could think about this. I'm just going to hold off on freaking out. I'm going to procrastinate. You know what? I have chosen to believe that everything is always working out for me. Even things that seem absolutely, life-ending, shattering, horrible, most awful things ever. I know that there is a way that I can look at this where I know I will be better off. And when you can kind of build that, because we're not all born with that. I think some people may be more naturally good at that, because they really have that very strong self-concept, but you can build that. You can build that capacity within yourself, and I think that is really what we're after. We're really after that kind of so strong, and understanding that there's something bigger going on here.
It's like a shock absorber. That's for me what the Resolve method, the course, is all about, and the Resolve community is. It's not that shocks don't happen. It's not that you're never affected by anything that occurs. It's that you've got this self-concept that, so here's like this event that happens, and here's you. And in between that is the self-concept that absorbs the shocks of this stuff, that dissipates those forces so they don't just hit you, like you're walking down the street and you get struck, by something, versus if you're in a car and it's got airbags and it's got different, I don't know, Tesla's got really good. So we sat in a Tesla yesterday, and so I'm thinking about this really great car. It's like really safe, you know what I mean? That's what all of this stuff is. Now, it doesn't work if you just read about this. Let's say something bad happens to you, then you go read about these concepts. That is like you can clean up some of the damage experientially. We can prevent the damage from going further. We're talking about installing this stuff on the front end. We're talking about not just understanding the stuff intellectually, but really integrating it experientially, making it such a part of your mental and experiential and emotional operating system that it starts to modify what that experience is. So just to be clear, like when you build that self-concept, it's like stuff happens to you, and maybe it's not so great, something shocking happens in your family or professional life or whatever, but you've got a self-concept that's way up in this desired future outcome, and it's drawing the rest of you there. And it might take time for your conscious mind or your intellect or, all of you to catch up, but there's a part of you that's like, well, I get through things. And when you have a self-concept, it's like, I get through things, I thrive, I discover the seed of greater benefit, everything's always working out for me, I make things work out for me, I let things work out for me, things just work out for me. It's amazing how that will sustain you through really difficult times. It's an interesting thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what this is all about, is that remodeling that self-concept. And a big part of, which is why I think the Resolve community is so cool, because you get the science thing, which is going to be coming out soon, right? The self-evaluation. Yes. There's the science component of it, the connections between your experience and your body. But then once you're in like the actual Resolve community, it's all really practical stuff. It's all, okay, but let's talk about self-evaluation specifically, not like anatomical connections to it. Let's talk about actually what a self-evaluation is experientially. Let's look at the different levers, the different handles to which you have access that can change or downgrade or resolve self-devaluation conflicts you've got going currently, and how can you kind of bulletproof yourself against these things? Like, what about your self-concept as it exists right now allowed these self-devaluation conflicts to occur? Because whatever it was that happened that prompted you to kind of devalue yourself, if your self-concept had been different than it was, it's possible that that conflict wouldn't have occurred. And that doesn't, that just means that moving forward, there are things that we can do with our self-concepts that will make it such that we are unfazed by negative things happening. And it'll make it such that we have a lot more positive things happen to us, and that we seize on those opportunities a lot more readily. And that we're just generally more secure, more empowered, more confident. You kind of get those basic ones first. You feel safe. You feel secure, you feel worthy, you feel just basically emotionally okay, existentially okay. Once that's taken care of, you start to really get to find out who you really are. Because if you spend all of your time feeling that you're unworthy of having just like basic human needs and desires met, you never find out who the full kind of flowering of who you are really is. But as you begin to kind of like reinforce this self-concept, as you begin to figure out how to meet the basic needs yourself, not rely on other people to validate you or to confirm to you that you're worthy, you build a self-concept that says that I'm worthy. So if your husband cheats on you, instead of saying, gosh, I guess that means I'm not worthy, you say, well, that behavior doesn't match because I'm worthy of being treated a certain way. And so there's something wrong with their behavior, not something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. That's that thing, is that when your self-concept is solid, and it is of one who deserves to be treated the way they desire to be treated, if someone else's behavior doesn't match that, that becomes their problem and not yours. It used to be my problem if someone else's behavior didn't match the way I wanted the way I wanted to feel that I was. If someone treated me like I was unworthy or unattractive or weird or awkward or something like that, which if you can believe was something happened quite a bit when I was younger, then all of a sudden their behavior was a problem for me, because I guess I thought I was pretty cool and okay, but I guess I'm a loser because they don't like me. Now, my self-concept is, and I just changed this, my self-concept is such that if someone's behavior doesn't match that, I say, oh, they're not a fit for me. They don't get it. They obviously don't get it. That's not how people treat me. They don't know that, so off I go somewhere else. And as a result of that, I move much more smoothly through life. I don't even have to be angry at those people anymore. I don't have to feel negative feelings towards people who treat me other than I would most like to be treated, because What I was really mad about before was not their behavior, but my experience of their behavior. What I had decided unconsciously and unintentionally that their treatment of me meant about me, to me, for me. When I took the meaning away, their behavior is just, well, that's how they're behaving. Where are we going to go now? When my self-concept was really secure, everything was fine, and I elicited a lot more of the behaviors that I really wanted. So that's what we want to do for you. That's really what the Resolve method is about. I mean, this G&M stuff's a lot of science. Someone was talking about that. It's a lot of information, and it's really useful and empowering information, especially when it relates directly to your case. At the end of the day, though, it's not scientific knowledge that gets you out of this stuff. It's the ability to regulate, to modulate, to change what your experience, what your self-concept is in those situations that are, kind of the source of conflicts for you, but also just in life in general. And when you really start to do that, and you start to be really conscious and intentional in building this self-concept, I'm telling you, it's amazing. It's stuff just doesn't stick to you the way it used to. Stuff just, it's stuff will still bump in. People will continue to bump into you, but you've got that shock absorber there, and it just dissipates that shock, and it doesn't bother you, and you sort of gracefully move on to the next thing. And when you really start doing that, when you start absorbing the shock of the diagnosis, you start absorbing the shock of the other people's treatment, you have these different mental and emotional maneuvers for responding resourcefully to just the stuff that's going on. There is so much well-being to be found in that resourceful response. There's so much empowerment. There is so much good feeling. There is so much of everything that you want that can be found in modifying the way you're interacting with your experience. And oh, by the way, you start changing how you interact, you start changing the way you respond. The outcomes that you create are a lot better, but that basic feeling gets a lot better. Your self-concept gets better. As your self-concept gets better, you get better at doing that stuff, and your whole reality really does begin to mold around that new self-concept. It's weird. Like, you have to see it to really fully understand it, which you should do. You should check it out.
Yeah. So if you guys are like feeling this and resonating with what we're talking about tonight, we created this Resolve community, and so it's a membership site that you enroll in. It's a monthly thing, and every month we give you tools, very practical things that you can do so you can fully more understand the conflict itself. There's a video training, a note pack, a workbook with journaling exercises where you can start to figure out what is my self-concept currently, how am I seeing the world now, and what could benefit by some changes. And then also a guided meditation that is created to help you to find more relaxation and peace and to really guide you to that place of resolution. And so it's called Resolve, and every single month there's going to be a brand new training with a specific conflict in mind. So what's up there right now is kind of conflict basics. You can get your, the foundation of understanding what is a conflict, what exactly is it that we're dealing with, and so that's what's in the community right now. And then next month, every single month, there's going to be new content added to the membership community, and the price does go up. So we're in a founding members price right now for the monthly, and so if you lock in at the price that it is right now, you'll get that price forever, but it will go up next month, and next month is when the self-devaluation specific module will come out. And so it's awesome. We're already getting really wonderful feedback from people that are in the community, and we really just wanted to create a place where we could take all of these things that we show you in these videos. We love the feedback that we get on the videos, but I know it's a lot, and we talk really fast, and we give you kind of a lot of stuff, and it's kind of okay, well, which thing do I do? How do I do it? Now you have access to a resource center is really what I want the community to be, is a resource center that you go to. You're I'm dealing with this conflict, and eventually, as months go on, we're gonna cover every conflict that happens. Identity conflicts, existence conflicts, abandonment conflicts, self-devaluation is going to be in several, we'll do several installments of self-devaluation because there's so many different types of self-devaluation conflicts that you can have. But when you have somewhere to go, you feel so empowered. You know what to do. You know how to think. You have these mental maneuvers, these ways of resolving conflict, of downgrading conflict, and then of conflict proofing yourself so that you become, that's what prevention is now. If you guys have been around G&M for a minute, you're starting to understand that what is prevention? Prevention is not having conflicts, overcoming conflicts quickly. That's how you don't get sick, is when you have this strong self-concept. You have this buffer. Stuff doesn't affect you at your, it doesn't rock you. You're able to, confidently move throughout life without, being conflicted all the time. And so that's what we want to give you, is the tools so that you can do it yourself. Because that's the thing, is wherever you are, every individual deserves to be able to do it themselves. You don't need to see you don't have to do a coaching session. You don't have to see a therapist. All of this stuff can be done on your own. We just want to help give you the roadmap and point you in the right direction so that you know what you need to do to kind of get there. So.
And the interesting thing for me is that, like, a lot of people, I do coaching, right? And so this is but the more equipped you are with this stuff, the more time you spend on your own with self-concept work. If you go and interact with a coach, the quality of the stuff that you get out of that, or an advisor or a mentor or whatever it is so much greater, because the things that they say to you, you have an understanding of yourself in which you can organize those things. And that's just such a powerful thing. Mm-hmm. I love this website. I think I talked about this last time. The website is so beautiful. It's so fun. One of the people who just got into it, right, was remarking how beautifully organized the stuff is. I love this, and I'm going to probably talk about this every time, because when you go onto this website, it is a pleasure to use. It's like, oh, okay, here's all my cool stuff, and here's my little lessons over here. It's like Every Bit of Life University. It's like there's a place where you go, it's aesthetically pleasing, you love the tools, it reinforces the use. The more you use the stuff, the better the results that you get. It's like a thing that you do. It's like when you get in here, you say, okay, they're going to give me some stuff every month, and I'm going to think about this stuff, I'm going to experiment with this stuff in my daily life and my moment-to-moment experience, and over the course of time of doing that, I'm going to develop a degree of self-understanding and a degree of self-awareness that's going to allow me to really do some profound work on my self-concept. It's not only going to assist me with my health situations, with stuff that's going on in terms of my physical body, it's also going to resolve the life stuff, right? That's the thing that I really love about this, is there's a direct connection between those two things. It's not, let me get healthy, let me cure my illness, and then let me go sort out all this other crap that life has. It's one thing. And when you change the way you relate to all of that stuff, it's an ecology. It's not like, there's not like one part of your body, another part of your body. There's this ecology, physically, experientially, mentally, spiritually, professionally. It's so funny that we divide this stuff up and think it's different. It really isn't. When your self-concept is one of an empowered and a happy and a successful and deserving and a worthy and a capable person, that isn't like sequestered to your professional life or your personal life. When you really fully adopt that new self-concept and you really start to respond to every aspect of your reality from that self-concept, everything in your reality starts to change, and it works everywhere.
It really does. And so we're so excited. I'll post the links so you guys can just check it out and see what you think, and we will see you again very soon. Have a great night.